China's flying car used to feel like one of those things people would see on a stage, smile for a second, and then completely forget about. For a long time, that reaction made sense because flying cars have always lived in that weird space between a cool idea and a real product. They look amazing in a demo, they sound futuristic in a headline, and then usually they disappear before anyone can buy one. But XPeng AeroHT is changing that conversation in a very real way. Reuters reported that the company expects early deliveries by the end of 2026, full-scale delivery in 2027, and that it already has more than 7,000 orders, mostly in China. The Guangzhou factory is designed to make 10,000 units a year, which is the kind of number that turns a concept into an actual business. And that is really the big shift here. At first, people looked at China's flying car stuff and thought it was just another shiny tech flex, another dramatic reveal, another project people would call hype in the comments. That reaction is normal when something looks too futuristic to be real. But once the company starts taking orders, building production capacity, and giving delivery dates, the whole thing stops being a stage show and starts looking like a product launch. XPeng's land aircraft carrier is not just a car with a gimmick attached to it either. It is a modular system with a 6-wheeled ground vehicle and a detachable aircraft module, so the roadside and the airside are built into one platform. That makes it feel less like science fiction and more like the first version of a new category. The price tells you a lot too. MarketWatch reported that the flying car is priced at around $300,000, which puts it firmly in luxury territory for now. That is not mass market, and it is not supposed to be. Early products like this usually start expensive, small, and a little weird. The point is not to sell 1 million units on day one. The point is to prove the category can actually exist in the real world. Once that happens, everything starts moving differently. The price can come down later, but first the company has to prove it can build, ship, support, and certify the thing at all. What makes this even more interesting is that XPeng is not treating the flying car like a one-off stunt. Reuters reported that the company also plans to begin humanoid robot production in late 2026, with early roles in reception and customer interaction, and robotaxi testing in Guangzhou in 2026. With global trials expected in 2027. So the flying car is not standing alone. It sits inside a much bigger push into mobility, automation, and physical AI. That matters because it shows the company is not just chasing one viral machine. It is trying to build an entire future tech stack at once. A factory designed for 10,000 units a year is not a random concept sketch. A delivery window in 2026 and 2027 is not vague hype. Those are the signs of a product moving from the imagination phase into the business phase. That is why the story feels bigger than just one vehicle. A few years ago, the reaction to this kind of thing was usually a mix of disbelief and sarcasm. People would say it looked cool, but would never ship. They would say it was all for show. In some cases, that kind of criticism was fair. A lot of tech demos really are just demos. But the moment a project starts pulling in real orders, the conversation changes. More than 7,000 orders is not a PR stunt. The other reason people are paying attention is that this is happening inside a much broader China tech story. China keeps getting treated like it is only about flashy reveals until the numbers show up. Then the tone changes. That happened with robotics first. In 2024, China installed about 295,000 industrial robots, which was 54% of all industrial robot deployments worldwide. Its operational stock passed 2 million units, the largest in the world, and industrial robot production reached roughly 556,000 units, up from about 33,000 in 2015. That is not a small improvement. That is a total industrial shift. And that is why the flying car story lands differently now. It is not just China made a weird machine. It is China turning a weird machine into a production story. It is China taking the same pattern that worked in EVs, batteries, and industrial robots and pushing it into flying mobility. Show the product, build the factory, collect the orders, set the delivery window, then scale. That sequence is what gives the whole project credibility. You do not have to pretend every Chinese demo is instantly revolutionary. You also do not have to dismiss everyone as propaganda. The better approach is just to look at the numbers and see what is actually happening. XPeng's next steps make that even clearer. Reuters said the company plans humanoid robot production to begin late in 2026 and robotaxi testing in Guangzhou during 2026, with global trials following in 2027. So the flying car is part of a broader plan where vehicles, robots, and autonomous systems all feed into the same company story. That is the part worth watching, because once a company can move across those categories, it stops looking like a one-product brand and starts looking like a platform. There is also a very human reason this story keeps catching fire online. People love to call things propaganda when they look too polished or too ambitious, especially when the visuals are dramatic and the claims are big. That happens with Chinese tech all the time. But in this case, the product is now sitting on top of real orders, real factory plans, and real delivery targets. So even if the early reaction was skepticism, the current version of the story has to be told more carefully. It is not just about the image anymore. It is about execution. That is what makes 2026 so important. The flying car is still expensive, still early, and still working through aviation approval. But it is no longer just a headline machine. The robot and robotaxi plans give it a bigger story around it. Taken together, it is hard to call this just a showpiece anymore. So the clean version of the story is this. People used to think China's flying car was just for show. That was a fair reaction at the start. But now the product has orders, a factory, a price, and a delivery timeline. XPeng is not just trying to look futuristic, it is trying to ship something futuristic. And if it pulls that off, the flying car stops being a joke and starts becoming the first real version of a category people used to say would never happen. And that is where the real test begins, because the hard part is never the reveal. It is everything that happens after the reveal. A vehicle like this does not win just because it looks futuristic. It has to survive certification, customer service, maintenance, insurance, training, and all the boring stuff that decides whether a product becomes a category. Reuters already said XPeng is still working through aviation approval, so the next chapter is not about hype anymore. It is about whether the company can handle the unglamorous work that turns a cool machine into something people can actually rely on. That is also why the order book matters so much. More than 7,000 orders sounds exciting, but it also creates pressure because once people put money down, they expect the company to deliver something that works in the real world and not just on a stage. That is a very different level of trust. A lot of futuristic products get attention first and trust later, but here the trust is already being built before mass delivery even starts. That makes the whole project feel less like a stunt and more like the start of a real customer base. The funny thing is that the flying car is probably not even the biggest strategic part of the story. The bigger move is that XPeng is trying to own the whole physical AI lane, where cars, robots, and autonomous systems all feed into the same brand story. The company wants humanoid robots in stores first, then broader rollout later, and it is also planning robotaxi tests in Guangzhou in 2026. That means the flying car is not standing alone as one wild product. It is part of a larger attempt to make XPeng look like a company that builds machines for the next era, not just one category of transport. It starts looking less like an automaker and more like a future tech platform. That is a big reason these demos matter in the first place. They do not just sell a product, they reshape how investors and customers think about the company behind it. The global angle is important too, because this is not staying inside China's borders. Reuters reported that XPeng is active in around 60 countries and had overseas sales make up 10% of volume and 15% of revenue in 2025, with the company expecting that international share to rise significantly over the next 5 to 10 years. That tells you XPeng is not just building for domestic curiosity, it is trying to turn these future products into exportable technology, which is a lot harder and a lot more valuable if it works. And that is where the Dubai flight becomes more than a cool side note. When a Chinese flying car project shows up in another country and gets people talking there too, it stops being only a local tech headline. It becomes part of a larger conversation about whether China can export futuristic mobility the same way it exports EVs, batteries, and consumer electronics. The 2025 manned flight in Dubai, plus the reported GCC orders, gave the project a more international feel before the main commercial rollout even started.